Hey guys, welcome to chapter 11 of the Forgemaster Game Character Masterclass. And in this one we're going to be getting into all the fun stuff. We're going to be taking a break from adding things in and tweaking models and topology and things. And we're going to be doing more of the fun stuff like detailing the face and adding wrinkles and all of the fun stuff that's really good and interesting to do. So let's kick this off. We're going to select the upper body and we're going to start focusing on his face. So make sure we've got the highest subdivision level selected so far, which we do. I'm going to select the Damien standard brush. And we're going to zoom in and see what we've got to work with. So just working with symmetry at the moment. And I'm going to start enhancing the various parts which kind of need it. If like me you just had a bit of a moment where your pen pressure sensitive just went a little bit weird, I find the best way to do it is to jump back to your desktop and just randomly click on the desktop for a little while, and then everything seems to start working normally again. And turn the intensity down anyway, as it's a little bit much for now. I'm going to start adding in a few wrinkles around the brows. I'm going to turn the sensitivity down, Z intensity down of the smooth brush as well. So hold down Shift and right click, hold down Shift and drag the Z intensity slider down. Or you can do it at the bottom of the screen if you've got something set up like mine, or the default ZBrush UI. I think it's at the top. And let's start putting some details in. So I really want to give him some wrinkles under the eye. I might actually turn the intensity back up on my Damien standard brush a bit more. So I really want to get some wrinkles in there. And I'm just going to do this sort of freehand a little bit first. Just get some of the main wrinkles in, then I'll start putting some alphas down, which will get us even more detail. Getting quite a shadow from this matte cap that I'm using, so I'm just going to change it out for something where it might be a little bit more easier to see. Let's try that. There we go. Just kills off the shadows a little bit more. So we can go crazy with the detail on the face. Remember, we do want to keep everything sort of in line with each other, so if we've got a lot of detail in certain places, we'd like to mirror that detail through the rest. Otherwise we get sort of a disjointed kind of look. For the most part, that's kind of accepted for characters in video games. We'll have higher resolution texture on the face, and so it'll have sort of its own UV map, which will take up all of the UV space. And it'll have its own texture, so it'll literally just be the head and maybe a few other little bits and pieces in there as well to save some space. And then we'll have the body and some larger parts all on the same UV map, which will reduce the amount of detail that we get to put through on it, but it also means that we'll be using less texture memory in the game engine, so get better performance. But I'll be talking through that in a lot more depth when we actually get onto that stage. So just putting in some wrinkles here. Grab yourself some reference if you like. I'm just kind of making up as I go. I've done enough sort of face details to kind of know where I'd expect wrinkles. Going to get a lot around the eyes, especially for this kind of character who, like I've said before, spends most of his day staring into the forge, squinting against the fire and the embers and that kind of thing. So he's going to have a lot of wrinkles around his eyes. You can really carve them in quite deep, don't be afraid of doing that. We might not have the geometry at the moment, but we can always smooth out and adds another subdivision level. So I really want to kind of sell the experience that this guy has. Whether that's just through his age, or through other means like scars and burns and stuff. I'm going to add a lot of burns to his body, as well as maybe a bit to his face, like I mentioned in the concepting stage. We really kind of need to just age him a bit more. Just going to deepen the wrinkles around the nares of sort of the mouth line and such. At least I think they're called nares. I'm not quite sure. So again, just using the Damien standard brush to do this. No special tricks or anything like that. Just carving in details by hand. So I'm going to get sort of the larger wrinkles in and using symmetry mode. And then I'm going to switch out of symmetry and do some asymmetrical details. It just adds more interest to the face, a lot more character, and it's a lot more natural looking. Especially when it comes to the forehead, as no one has symmetrical wrinkles on the forehead. But just doing what I can right now, just to add a little bit extra to him. And we'll continue to use smooth and make sure that we get a nicer finish for it. If you really want to bring out the lips as well, you can hold down Alt while using the Damien standard brush. So trace the line of his lips, smooth it back along the edge, and that'll add a bit more of an indication of his lips there. So we can do that throughout the rest, wherever we want to add sort of sharper line to really define the shape of his mouth. Kind of just sits it off the surface a little bit, so we'll be able to catch some details like that using the normal maps. Just going to use the H polish brush just to sharpen them up a little bit. Let's add a few more planes to it, just to make it look a bit more manly and less soft. Remember to smooth afterwards. So it's definitely added a bit more to his mouth there. Just kind of deepening the philtrum, which is the bit between the sort of center of the nose and the lips. And then we can jump back to Damien standard. And, oops, don't want to do that. Gonna add a few wrinkles around his lips there. Turn on transparency. Now we don't have to detail the areas that are covered by the beard. However, we will have to model the rest of the face so that if it went on to be animated, would get realistic animation of the face thanks to decent topology. Just going to move the corner of the beard out just a little bit, with the moustache out, just so we can see a bit more of his mouth in there. So the beard will be a separate element, it's not going to be sort of glued to his face. It will be in some areas, but we do need to keep the topology quite clean. For animation purposes. So let's see what else we can get done at this resolution. So I add some larger wrinkles here, which kind of flow into the cheeks. Smooth it back. You can always really enhance age by sort of having these sort of wrinkles and things which flow downwards. So sort of where skin is starting to sag. It's a really good way of selling the age of a character. The skin won't be perfect, and I'll do a few little tweaks later on to sort of show how we can sort of give that effect of lumpy skin. I'm going to change the material now, as I'm not really too bothered about the shadows. We're not getting any in the area we're working in. Just going to add a little fold at the back of his head. Going to refine a few of the bits and pieces now, as this matte cap shows up a few of the little problems. Cool. Alrighty, so let's see what else we can get in here. Let's just kind of add a few more wrinkles to the jowls. Enhance that by using the inflate brush. Just add a bit of weight to these areas. There we go, it's looking a lot older, a lot sterner. Might just use the inflate brush around the bags of his eyes to make them look a little bit, tiny bit swollen. Can't imagine being a blacksmith is particularly good for your health. And that'll sort of do for the manually created wrinkles on the face. Let's start doing something which I'm never a big fan of, and that's sort of just working on the ears a bit, again looking a little bit more natural. So using the clay build brush just to kind of sink into the area of the ear. Remember to smooth it back. We've got quite a high density of polygons in this area, so working at this subdivision level might not be the best idea. So just going to drop down some, so I can get a much softer effect. Just get a bit of a hole in there. I'm just roughly putting these details in. It's starting to look a whole lot more sort of ear-like now. So you don't have to come in and do every single detail of the ear, it's just a case of Just indicate the sort of the surface changes and the depth changes, and that'll do us absolutely fine. As you can tell, we can see it's an ear. It looks about right. It's not 100% correct, but it's going to do us fine. So let's see, let's go on to solo mode. Don't have to worry about the lower part of his face as the beard's going to cover it, as you can see. Though it'd be good to get a few... No, there's not much point really. Good to get a few details in on his just sort of his upper lip area. Can never remember the name of this part either. Add a few wrinkles, jump up subdivision level, smooth them down. It'll just again sell the age. And just put a few tiny details on the lips. Didn't mean to do that. If we grab the crease brush, this isn't one which ships with ZBrush, but I will give a link to my brush collection anyway, and it should be included in there. By default it's set to edition, so if you right click and do Z sub, get some nice fine lines in there. Start adding some detail to the lips. Again, don't worry about symmetry for the time being. We're going to be coming in and sort of adding a few other details when we get to a higher subdivision level, and the changes will be a lot more obvious. Just indicating what we want to do, and we can come back later on and sort of finish it off. So the crease brush is really good for sort of areas where, if I just give an example here, it's very fine. It does a lot of pinching as compared to the Damien standard brush. It does a much sort of softer cut in, whereas the crease is a lot sharper. So let's start moving on to the rest of his body. We're just going to solo mode. And again, it's probably going to be seen without his apron at some point, so I'm just going to use a Damien standard brush to start putting in a few little indications of wrinkles on the rest of his skin. It's going to have been quite tough, so I imagine he's going to have had ripped skin at some time. So we can always indicate that with some finer wrinkles. Of course, they're going to have sagged with age. So there's no science to the way that I'm doing this, I'm just kind of indicating where it will be. When I smooth back, we'll get a much better indication of what it will look like. So smooth it back. Quite fine, like quite a lot of smoothing going on, and keep it quite subtle. So it really works as a bit more sort of surface detail. So remember, muscles sag from the ankle points thanks to gravity. So the pectorals attach kind of under this area as well as at the chest. So we'd have sort of sag lines kind of coming this way. We can crisscross them as well, as wrinkles work that way. Smooth them back. Notice this is instantly adding the effect of age to him. Just going to right click, hold down shift, and I'm going to drag the intensity up of my smooth brush again. So I can smooth things down a little bit more. We don't want them to be that over the top. After all, he's still going to be in quite decent shape as he's still blacksmithing. But we can create a bit more muscle definition as well, just to sort of help sell them a bit more. See what else we can get in here. Just sort of enhance, sort of rib cage would be around about here. I'm going to do a whole lot there, I just kind of want to get it straight in my head. We then have the lats around here. So we can add a few wrinkles there. I don't want to go too crazy with the wrinkles on his stomach area because we want to go for a sort of a staunch look rather than a podgy look. So a few areas where sagging muscle will be relevant, and a bit of a belly. After all, Vikings love their beer, so we're told. Just sort of enhance that belly button a bit. Okay. Just kind of put in where sort of he may have just had sort of remnants of abs in there. And I just kind of help accentuate that they were there at some point. Oops, too deep there. Oh, this detail might go missing in the projection anyway, but it'll still be there quite subtly. And it just adds a nice sort of unevenness to the surface as well. So let's smooth that back a little bit more. There we go. Cool. So let's see what other wrinkles we can do. Obviously get some wrinkles sort of under the armpit area. I'm going to do a whole lot with that because it will look weird if we go overboard with it. Okay, so let's start getting some alphas in here. I don't think we really need to do too much around the back, maybe sort of enhance this bit a tiny bit more. Not much more than that though, really. Okay. It's going to take the sensitivity down, the intensity down a bit. It's a bit easier to control. Okay, so it's a little bit too much down there. Just going to smooth that back a whole lot more. This looks far too drawn on. I'd rather keep that subtle, I think. Okay, so elbows next, and we'll get some alphas in. So really just going to sort of enhance this fold to turn the intensity back up a tiny bit more. Enhance this fold around the elbow, so that'll really help sell sort of age and sagging skin. Makes everything look a whole lot more convincing. There we go. And possibly a little bit sort of in the and I'm going to call it the anti-elbow, as I really don't know what else to call it. There we go. Cool, so I've aged him a little bit more. So let's start bringing in some alphas. I shared a lot of these alphas on my creature workshop, so I'll post a link on this video anyway, but they're also on my creature workshop. Don't want to bother him there, as we won't see his chin. Let's grab the standard brush. We're just going to grab an alpha. Go to import. We're going to go to I've got them in my resources palette. I think we're going to go with some wrinkles. So we're going to bring our wrinkles in here. Let's hold down shift and click on the last one after selecting the first. We can import all of them at once. And let's have a look, see what we've got here. There's quite a fine one that I like using, if I can find it. I think that's the one. No, that's it. SW Wrinkles 2. And I'm going to choose a drag rectangle. I'm going to choose Z sub, so we can embed these wrinkles into the skin. And we're going to start off with quite a low intensity just to see what it looks like. Very faint. So just turn the intensity up to sort of about double that. And we can start drawing that onto our mesh. I think I'm going to increase the intensity a little bit more. And let's see how many polys we're dealing with on this one. We've got 1.5 million, so let's just go ahead and divide once more. And now we're dealing with 6 million, so I'm alright with that. My computer's alright with that, and that should give us more than enough resolution for detail. As you can see, we've got some nice clean wrinkles going on here. Might even need to turn the intensity down again actually. Now we've got the resolution to play with. There we go. So let's just start popping these on. We'll be adding a few more sort of intermediate details as we go. I think it'll help if we turn solo mode off so you can see it with the beard and see the overall effect on the skin. Don't think that alpha works around the nose. Works pretty well around the eyes. Actually going to smooth it back a bit. I think it's maybe a little bit too much. See what it looks like around the mouth. That looks pretty good. So we'll just pop that in there. Again, we'll be doing some asymmetrical detailing in a bit. Just getting little hints of this alpha popped in. I'm going to use great amounts of it as it's not the best for every situation. And we'll grab SW Wrinkles 03 and we'll see what that does for our crow's feet. I think that works pretty well actually, so I think what I'm going to do is smooth down the wrinkles that we put in here just to reduce them a little bit, so we're not just putting bunches of cross-hatching all over the top. And I'm just going to drop that in pretty much exclusively at this point. Maybe a little bit further down. There we go. Tiny bit in that corner. And let's see what else we've got. It's a little bit too creature-like, I think. Let's see. We've got some knuckles and things. That's not going to be relevant for this bit. But if we just grab this sort of straight one and take the intensity down, just create some nice cross-hatched wrinkles over the eyes, over the eye bags. Sorry, I can't get my words out. You can layer these on top, cross-hatch them a bit because wrinkles always have other wrinkles passing through. It's probably a little bit better suited for this sort of area as well. So one thing that I did forget is the forehead. I'm going to turn off symmetry for that. I'm going to get my Damien Standard brush and just sort of start putting in some random little wrinkles. Again, cross-hatching works great with the forehead. Depending on how wrinkly you want to make it, just keep on going. Smooth them back. Cut back in again, just to sort of give us some really nice deep ones. And when we start putting asymmetrical wrinkles in, that's when character really starts to pop out. Makes the face look a whole lot more natural, a lot more expressive. So we don't have a whole lot of polys up in the forehead, which is kind of annoying, but it shouldn't make too much of a difference to the quality of our normal maps. We should be able to smooth the normals down and remove any blocky parts that appear. So don't worry too much about that if it's happening for you as well. Another way of fixing it would be to completely chop his head off, but then we could probably end up with a seam and different texture variation along where we'd chop his head off. And we don't really have any areas where we could really cover it with clothing, so I'd rather avoid that, as it's a lot more noticeable than just some slightly less detailed wrinkles. And it's one of those things that could really bring someone out of the immersion of a game as well, seeing seams on textures and stuff, so I'm quite happy with this right now. So that's looking pretty cool. Maybe a little bit too wrinkly, so smooth it out a bit more. Or maybe not. That's good. I quite like that. Fine, all good there. Let's get back to our standard brush, and we'll just drag this over the area. Just kind of add a few more finer wrinkles to it. Change the brush size up and just tap smooth a few times just to blur it back down. So we've got some nice subtle wrinkles in there. We'll do the same on the cheeks as well. And this is where the asymmetrical part starts to come in. You can kind of just vary the way that they flow. So I'd quite like to add a burn to him, so this is a good place to do it. So I think on the right hand side, on his left hand side, and our right, we're going to have eyebrows, bushy eyebrows. I'll probably do this with planes on the actual game model. But for the purpose of figuring this out, I think I'm just going to have sort of half an eyebrow on this section. And then I think we'll just kind of add, if we go to the layer brush, change the intensity down, so we do an add, and from here we can kind of add a raised part, which we're going to use for our burn. It's not going to look particularly great at the moment. I think that'd be pretty decent in terms of a burn, perhaps. Probably not. Let's try Alt actually. So I'm going to go on to Z sub, and I'm going to take the intensity down to 2 instead, and just going to bite into his skin a bit. So add a bit more sort of like a splash kind of effect to it. Kind of just looks like someone's been nibbling away at his skin, which will look pretty good once we've got the rest of this done. So with the layer brush, you can actually just go over the same parts again and turn the intensity down to 1 instead. 1 instead of 0. There we go. And we can sort of finesse this a little bit. Notice that the layers will still be there. You'll just kind of add another little bit of a step to each part. This isn't going to look great at the second, but when you see what I'll do next, it'll make more sense. Let's smooth these down. Going to grab the clay build brush. I'm just going to start sort of filling this in with sort of like puffy skin. So the cool thing about this is the way it's, if you've ever had a scar, you'll notice that you sort of get these lines where it looks like it's sewn together. So using the clay build brush and just like dragging it from side to side will create that very similar kind of effect. So then we can kind of just build up the edges, smooth it down a bit. Scars are usually quite shiny as well, I mean depending on where they are. Maybe a few pock marks here and there. Smooth them down. Alternate between Z add and Z subtract. It'll help randomize it a bit, make it look not quite so clean. And always remember to smooth things down. So that looks a lot more sort of burn-like, I think. I have done in the past where I've Googled burn victims. It's not the most pleasant thing, but you know, sometimes needs must, especially when you're working on a horror game. Burn victims, skin cancer, that's a necrotic skin condition. Yeah, it's pretty nasty. But you can kind of see all the weird things that go on with skin when things go wrong. Definitely sticks in your mind, I'll tell you that. So if you're stuck for a bit of reference, have at Google Images, but I'm not responsible to the mental scarring you may suffer. In all honesty though, it's worth doing, because if you want to get into a job doing this, chances are you're probably going to be asked to do something quite revolting at some point, and instead of making it up as you go, some reference is definitely going to be needed. So keep it in mind, get it done sooner rather than later. And hopefully you're not too fragile to do that. So I'm being deliberately messy. Adding some pop marks in. There we go. So we've got our burn. When we texture that, that'll be a whole lot more convincing as well. So let's go back to standard brush. Let's see what kind of wrinkles we can get in here. Just kind of follow the surface a bit more. Smooth them out if you don't want them too over the top. Thank you, ZBrush. There we are. Probably going to skip out on the nose for now. It might be better to do that sort of manually with some large skin pores or something like that. So I'm just going to smooth it back down. Going to leave some of the indications in there. Let's see if we can add some of these details to the upper mouth. Increase the intensity a bit more, get a bit more of a cut in here and there. Smooth it back. Don't be afraid to go wild with the wrinkles, you can always smooth them down. You'd rather something look too wrinkly and just pass your smooth brush over it like that, then have to sort of sculpt in extra wrinkles because you're kind of too scared to put them in the first place. There's many ways of getting back to things in ZBrush. You've got this huge undo history up here. I mean, I've got what, 1,935 undo levels on this subtool alone, and each subtool has its own undo history. So you never have to be too worried about really losing anything that you've done. So let's start getting a few extra wrinkles towards the back. Don't think that's really suited for it. I'm going to grab SW Wrinkles 2, just kind of get a bit more of a rugged feel. Smooth them down. Again, I'm working asymmetrically here, as nothing's ever exactly the same from one side to the other. Okay, so we can get going on down the neck. You can see I'm actually stretching these out quite big. We don't have to worry too much about it. So these details aren't going to show up like fantastically well on the normal maps, unless they're very, very deep. But it will help our texture. It will help our texturing quite a bit. So it's worth doing. So it's looking pretty tough now. Looking like he's done his fair share of smithing in his time. And the wrinkles are just kind of, even the ones which we just smooth out quite a lot, like the ones we've just done on the shoulders, it just helps add a bit sort of, bit of a natural sort of bumpy feel to the skin. That will come through in the normal maps and just make him look a little bit more natural. So I'm going to turn the intensity down a bit more and just going to put some wrinkles over the head, sort of following the direction of the model. And these aren't going to show up greatly, but again they'll help us with our texturing and our painting. And if they do show up well in the maps, we can knock them back if they don't look too good, or we'll be able to use them to aid our texture enhancement later on. So just kind of faintly putting them in and knocking them back with a smooth. So kind of get this overall kind of look. And we want them very faint on the head. Generally your head doesn't get very wrinkly, but obviously your skin can get dry and cracked. So can use that in there. Oops, wrong button. Okay. Turn solo mode back on. Just get some wrinkles in on his chest, just to enhance the ones that we've already got. Now from one side of the body to the other, I'm flipping the alpha round. Might turn the intensity up a tiny bit more. And I've got no problems about cross layering them on top of each other. Smoothing them back, putting them again on top of each other, as wrinkles do tend to cross each other and form sort of like these little forks and things. So again, wrinkles on the belly. Just drag them out quite large and smooth them back, because we do want his skin to be quite taut over his stomach, just to keep that sort of staunch feeling. I actually switched to a different alpha actually for this section. I think if we go with wrinkles 04, drag the intensity down, see what kind of effect we get with those. It's a lot more natural for this area of the body. There we go. Build them up and knock them back. And keep the belly quite smooth. The faint lines will kind of be like, you know, sort of like old stretched skin. And that'll really enhance our texture when we do it. Sort of like, I don't know if you've ever like lost a lot of weight very quickly and you've ended up sort of with stretch lines. Usually around like the thigh or something like that. It's kind of the look that we're going for more than anything else. Really don't want too many wrinkles on the back. But we just want to carry on sort of the surface detail. And this guy isn't going to be photorealistic. It's not designed to be. If it was, then I'd be using photos as reference and modelling it, you know, sort of with that in mind. Going for a very sort of stylized kind of character. So I think sort of The Witcher, perhaps, or maybe Dark Souls. So we're not going to be using any sort of photo reference for the face. We're going to be painting it manually, just so I can kind of keep that sort of stylized sense to it. Again, a lot of these wrinkles are going to be repeated. However, when you overlay them on top of each other, it's a lot harder to spot. So remember to have vertical wrinkles as well as horizontal ones. It'll break up the lines and reduce the sort of pattern effect, because the human eye is very good at picking up patterns. So if you see areas which look like they're obviously repeating, smooth them back and drop another wrinkle over the top. Just kind of break it up a bit more. It's one of the reasons I'm doing it asymmetrically as well, just to help prevent that from happening. And it's also on varying the size of the alphas that I put down. Sometimes it's easier just to follow a contour with it smaller or larger, and sometimes it's just really easy to fade the alphas into each other and just create these sort of unique looking wrinkles. So it's looking a lot older now, a lot more haggard. Just going to have a quick check on these elbows. I think we'll use one of the knuckle textures for this. You can see them. Around here somewhere, there we go. So go with the knuckle. And I'm going to switch that to Z add. Drag that on. So you get that sort of bumpy, warty kind of look where everybody's elbows are a little bit on the nasty side. Didn't mean to do that. Let's just drag over, get a slightly different alpha. Let's see if I can get some of these wrinkles worked in. Switch your brush over to Z sub after doing the knuckles, and you can kind of add, I think we increase the Z intensity a bit more. Nah, it's just too much. Let's do the knuckle wrinkle on the other side as well. Just going to grab a different knuckle wrinkle, switch it onto add, and drag it over. Nope, too much. Take the intensity down. So you'll find that if you take a texture and it stretches over a different area, you might tend to get these sort of stretch lines. That works really well. I actually like it when that happens. It doesn't happen often enough for my liking. You can kind of force it to happen though, just by dragging it off the side. You'll stretch it around, try and project it onto the rest of the mesh. So coming back to that sort of burn idea from earlier on, switch to Z sub mode. I'd quite like to carry on that burn on his right hand side. So I'm going to grab the layer tool, the layer brush rather, and I'm going to set the Z intensity to 1. Let's see, we on sub, yep. And I'm just going to sort of bring this up. It's not going to be obviously visible thanks to the wrinkles now, unless you turn up the intensity a bit more. We could carry that on over his muscle. Imagine this would have been quite debilitating when it happened. Maybe a splash of molten iron or something like that, molten steel. So we can chew that up a fair bit just using layers, the layer tool, layer brush. Don't know why I keep on referring to brushes as tools. Maybe it's just because they kind of are in a way. I know it's kind of bad with ZBrush terminology where tools are actually a thing, but I hope you understand what I'm saying when I say that. So just getting the clay build brush and I'm going to start building up sort of this layer of scar tissue. So start it from different points, overlay it, have it come outside of the layers that you built up or put down. So crisscross it. Just going to turn the intensity down of my smooth brush. So I don't get rid of that sort of patterned effect too much when I do this. I think that's going to look pretty good when we actually add some texture to it. May well not have a nipple now, but oh well. Things you do for blacksmithing. Again, just add some pot marks and things around, just be very messy with it. After all, things are meant to have been splattered, so I'm going to get a bit more of a splattered kind of look. So it's the kind of effect that you'd get sort of in modern day when frag grenades go off or that sort of thing. So there's a bit of reference if you need to know what pot marks and things look like. Shotgun blasts do a similar sort of thing to the skin. So I know I've mentioned reference a lot. It's because the importance of reference can't really be overstated. I'm very familiar with the kind of things that I need for this, and it's stuff which I've done a fair amount of in the past, so I'm very familiar with it. If you've never done anything like this before, where you've been sort of sculpting wounds and things like that, then get on Google image search. If needs be, use Chrome and do an incognito window if you don't want anyone seeing your search history. But look this stuff up because it's really useful. So that's going to look pretty cool with some texture on it. Just add a little bit extra in there just for look. Cool. So it's a bit of a badass. I'm actually adding a bit more of a burn to his forearm, his upper arm as well. Just hit layer. Oops. Let's just chew into that a little bit. Not too much, as I think we've already got quite enough. I imagine he would have tried to shield himself with his arm. Who knows? He's a badass Viking, so he might not even bothered. Probably carried on working. It's something for the character anyway. Always adds a bit of history. There we go. So not too much, but it will show up quite nicely in the normal maps. Yeah, cool. I think that'll do on his upper body. So with that, guys, we're going to move on to the rest. Let's turn solo mode back on. You can see it's really starting to come together. So join me in the next chapter and we'll move on to the next section for detailing. I think we'll probably go on to the apron, as it's probably the largest part. And I'll cover a few different ways of being able to do that really quickly and get some nice texture going. So join me in the next chapter, guys, and meantime, happy sculpting and take care.